Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the small screen mounted on his workbench. The numbers on his savings account made him smile for the first time in months. 3 years of fixing ships for other people had finally paid off. He had enough money to buy his own vessel. The government surplus auction was happening today at the main orbital station above Earth. Jake had been watching the listings for weeks, studying every ship that would go up for sale. Most of them were way too expensive for someone like him. The big cargo haulers and military vessels would sell for millions of credits. But there was one ship that caught his eye. The Stellar Dawn was a mid-sized freighter that had seen better days. Her hull showed scratches and dents from years of hard work. The listing mentioned outdated navigation systems and engines that needed attention. Most buyers would run away from such problems. Jake saw opportunity. He cleaned himself up and put on his best clothes. The auction hall was packed with traders, corporate buyers, and wealthy collectors. Jake felt out of place among all these people in expensive suits. He found a seat in the back and waited for his ship to come up for sale. The auctioneer was a tall man with a loud voice who seemed to enjoy his work. He started with the expensive ships first. Jake watched as vessels sold for prices that made his head spin. A sleek passenger liner went for 12 million credits. A military escort ship sold for 8 million. Each sale made Jake more nervous about his chances. Finally, the Stellar Dawn appeared on the big screen above the auction stage. The auctioneer read out her specifications in a bored voice. Cargo capacity of 2,000 tons. Maximum speed of 0.8 light speed, age of 15 years. The list of problems was much longer than the list of good features. Jake looked around the room and was surprised to see that most people were not paying attention. Only a few bidders seemed interested in the old freighter. This was better than he had hoped for. The bidding started at 50,000 credits. Jake raised his hand immediately. A woman in a blue suit across the room bid 60,000. Jake went to 70,000. A man near the front bid 80,000. Jake's heart was beating fast, but he stayed calm and bid 90,000. The woman in the blue suit looked at the ship's image on the screen and shook her head. She was out. The man near the front hesitated for a long moment before bidding 100,000. Jake knew this was his moment. He had 120,000 credits saved up. He could afford to go higher. Jake bid 110,000 credits. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air recycling system. The man near the front looked at his tablet and seemed to be doing calculations. After what felt like forever, he shook his head and looked away. The auctioneer called out for any other bids. Jake held his breath and waited. No one else raised their hand. The auctioneer brought his hammer down with a loud bang. The Stellar Dawn was his. People started to leave for the next auction, but Jake sat in his chair for a few minutes. He owned a starship. After all these years of dreaming and saving, he finally had his own vessel. It didn't matter that she was old and needed work. She was his. A clerk approached Jake with a tablet full of paperwork. The legal documents were confusing, but Jake signed everything he needed to sign. The clerk explained that the ship would be transferred to his name within a week. All previous cargo and equipment would remain on board as part of the sale. Jake asked about the ship's history. The clerk looked at his records and told him that the Stellar Dawn had been owned by Captain Rodriguez, a trader who had worked the outer colonies for many years. Rodriguez had disappeared 6 months ago, leaving the ship abandoned at a frontier station. The government had seized it for unpaid docking fees. The clerk handed Jake a small data chip containing all the ship's technical manuals and access codes. He also gave him a key card that would let him board the vessel once the transfer was complete. Jake thanked the man and walked out of the auction hall feeling like he was floating on air. The next week passed slowly. Jake quit his job at the shipyard and spent his time reading about his new ship. The technical manuals were thick and full of information about systems he would need to learn. The engines were older models but still reliable. The life support systems were basic but functional. Everything could be fixed or upgraded with time and money. Jake also researched Captain Rodriguez but found very little information about the Man, he had a clean record with the trading authority and no history of legal problems. His disappearance remained a mystery. Some reports suggested he had been involved in smuggling operations, but nothing was ever proven on the day of the transfer. Jake took a shuttle to the orbital depot where his ship was docked. The Stellar Dawn looked even more worn up close than she had in the auction photos. Her hull plates were faded and scratched. Some of the external lights were burned out. But she was solid, and SPACEWORTA used his keycard to open the main airlock. The ship's interior was clean but showed signs of hasty departure. Personal items were scattered around the captain's quarters. The galley still had food in the refrigeration unit. It was as if Rodriguez had left intending to come back. Soon, the ship's computer recognized Jake's new ownership codes and welcomed him aboard. The voice was mechanical but friendly. Jake spent the rest of the day exploring every room and corridor. The Stellar Dawn was larger than he had expected. Besides the main cargo hold, there were several smaller storage areas and crew quarters. For 6 people. As evening approached, Jake stood on the ship's small observation deck and looked out at the stars. Tomorrow he would begin the real work of getting his ship ready for space. There would be repairs to make and systems to upgrade. But tonight he was content to just be the captain of his own vessel. He had bought a cheap ship at auction and gotten exactly what he paid for. An old freighter with problems that would take months to fix. Jake smiled as he watched the stars. He had no idea that his bargain purchase came with something far more valuable and complicated than he could have imagined. Jake woke up early the next morning with a long list of things to do. He had spent the night in the captain's quarters, sleeping in Rodriguez's old bed. The ship felt strange and empty around him, but it was his home now. He needed to make it work. The first job was checking all the ship's systems. Jake started with the engines because nothing else mattered if the ship could not move. He climbed down to the engine room and began his inspection. The main drive unit was older than he had hoped, but still in good condition. The power converters needed new filters and the cooling system had a small leak. These were problems he could fix. The life support systems were next on his list. The air recycling unit was working but making odd noises. Jake found the problem quickly. The main fan had a loose bearing that would need replacement. The water recycling system was clean and functional. The heating units were old but reliable. Jake spent the morning working his way through the ship room by room. The bridge equipment was outdated, but everything seemed to work. The navigation computer was slow and would need upgrading eventually. The communication system had good range, but the display screens flickered sometimes. By afternoon, Jake had checked most of the ship except for the lower deck storage areas. He had saved these for last because they were the least important for getting the ship running. The main cargo hold was empty except for some old shipping containers that Rodriguez had left behind. The containers were locked, but Jake had the access codes from the ship's computer. The first container held spare parts for the ship's systems. Jake was pleased to find filters, circuits, and other components he would need for repairs. The second container was full of trade goods that Rodriguez had never delivered, exotic spices, rare minerals, and luxury items that were worth good money on the right planets. Jake was feeling lucky about his purchase when he reached the third storage area. This section was different from the others. The door was heavier and had additional locks. The ship's computer asked for special authorization before opening it. Jake used Rodriguez's captain codes and the door finally opened. Inside was a small room that looked more like a laboratory than a storage area. Strange equipment lined the walls and several computers were still running. Jake had never seen technology like this before. The designs were not human and the materials looked foreign. Everything had a strange blue glow that made him uncomfortable. At the center of the room was the most unusual thing Jake had ever seen. It was a large pod made of some kind of transparent metal. The pod was connected to power lines and filled with a misty gas that swirled around inside. Through the clear walls, Jake could see something that made his heart stop. There was a person inside the pod. At least it looked like a person. The figure was about the size of a human woman, but her skin was pale blue instead of normal flesh color. Her hair was long and white and seemed to float in the gas around her. Strange markings covered her arms and face like tattoos, but they glowed with soft light. Jake stepped closer to the pod and saw that the woman was breathing slowly. Lights on the pod's control panel showed that she was alive but in some kind of deep sleep. Her eyes were closed and her face was peaceful. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien and yet somehow familiar. A small screen near the pod showed readings that Jake could not understand. The language was not human and the symbols meant nothing to him. But there was also a data chip attached to the pod with a label in English. Jake pulled out the chip and inserted it into his portable computer. The chip contained a video message from Captain Rodriguez. The man looked tired and worried as he spoke. He explained that the woman in the pod was named Zara and that she came from a planet called Kelia. Her people had made some kind of agreement with Rodriguez involving trade and diplomacy. Rodriguez said that Zara had volunteered to travel with him as part of the deal between humans and her people. She had been placed in the stasis pod for the long journey to Earth, but something had gone wrong with the negotiations and Rodriguez had been forced to abandon his ship. He said he was sorry and that whoever found Zara should wake her up and help her get home. The message ended with Rodriguez giving the activation code for the pod. He said the code was Sunrise 77 Alpha and that it would safely bring Zara out of stasis. He warned that she might be confused and scared when she woke up because she would be far from home and surrounded by strangers. Jake played the message 3 times to make sure he understood everything. He was now the owner of a ship that came with an alien woman in stasis. Rodriguez had made some kind of deal with her people and then disappeared, leaving Jake to deal with the consequences. Jake spent the rest of the day researching everything he could find about alien contact and stasis technology. There was not much information available to civilians. Most of what he found was rumors and speculation from the frontier colonies. Some stories mentioned strange beings living on distant worlds, but nothing official. The more Jake thought about the situation, the more complicated it became. If he woke up Zara, what would he say to her? How would he explain that Rodriguez was gone and that she was now stuck with a complete stranger? If he did not wake her up, how long could she stay in stasis safely? Jake also worried about the legal implications. Was Zara considered property that came with the ship? Did he have any responsibility to help her? What if her people came looking for her and found her with him instead of Rodriguez? As night fell, Jake stood in the laboratory looking at the sleeping alien woman. She seemed so peaceful and vulnerable in her pod. He had come looking for a simple cargo ship and instead found himself responsible for the life of a being from another world. Jake made his decision. He would spend the next day preparing the ship's medical bay and learning everything he could about the stasis pod systems. Then he would wake up Zara and face whatever consequences came next. It was the right thing to do, even if it complicated his life beyond anything he had imagined. The stellar dawn had definitely come with more than he had bargained for. Jake did not sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the alien woman floating in her pod. He kept thinking about Rodriguez's message and the responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders. By morning, he had made up his mind. He would wake her up. The next 2 days were spent preparing for what might happen. Jake moved medical supplies to the room next to the laboratory. He read everything he could find about first aid and emergency treatment. He also practiced what he would say when Zara woke up. The words felt strange in his mouth, but he wanted to be ready. Jake studied the stasis pod's control systems until he understood how they worked. The technology was far more advanced than anything humans had built. The pod monitored every aspect of Zara's body and kept her in perfect health while she slept. Waking her up would take several hours as her body slowly returned to normal function. On the 3rd morning, Jake stood before the pod with the activation code ready. His hands were shaking as he approached the control panel. This was the moment that would change everything. Once he woke Zara up, there would be no going back. He would be responsible for an alien being who was far from home and completely dependent on him. Jake entered the code Sunrise 77 Alpha into the pod's computer. The machine hummed to life and began the wake-up process. Lights flashed on the control panel as the pod system started bringing Zara back from her deep sleep. The process would take 6 hours according to the display. Jake spent the waiting time making final preparations. He cooked a simple meal that he hoped would not upset an alien stomach. He prepared clean clothes and blankets. He also practiced his speech again, trying to find the right words to explain the situation without frightening her. As the 6th hour approached, Jake watched the pod's monitors carefully. Zara's breathing was getting faster and her body was warming up. The misty gas inside the pod was clearing away. Her eyes began to move beneath her closed lids as if she was dreaming. The pod made a soft chime and the top section slowly opened. Fresh air flowed in to replace the stasis gas. Zara's eyes fluttered open and she took her first real breath in months. Jake held his breath as she slowly sat up and looked around the room. Zara's eyes were the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. They were violet-colored and seemed to glow with inner light. She looked at Jake with confusion and fear. She spoke in a musical language that he had never heard before. The words flowed like water and reminded him of singing. After a moment, Zara seemed to remember something. She cleared her throat and spoke in accented English. Her voice was soft and pleasant despite her obvious worry. "I am Zara of the Callian people. Are you Captain Rodriguez?" Jake stepped forward slowly with his hands visible to show he meant no harm. "My name is Jake Morrison. I am sorry to tell you that Captain Rodriguez is not here. He left this ship several months ago and I bought it at auction. I found you in the pod yesterday." Zara's violet eyes widened and she pressed her back against the pod. "Rodriguez is gone? Where did he go? What happened to our agreement?" Her voice was getting higher and Jake could see that she was becoming scared. Jake sat down on the floor so that he would not tower over her. "I do not know what happened to Rodriguez. He left a message explaining that you were traveling with him as part of some kind of deal between your people and humans. He said something went wrong and he had to abandon the ship." Zara was quiet for a long time as she processed this information. Jake could see her thinking hard about what this meant for her situation. Finally, she spoke again. "According to the laws of my people, I am bound to whoever owns this ship. If Rodriguez is gone and you are the new owner, then I am bound to you." Jake did not understand what she meant by bound, but it did not sound good. "I do not want anyone to be bound to me. You are free to do whatever you want. I just want to help you get home safely." Zara shook her head sadly. "You do not understand. My people sent me on this mission to create an alliance with humanity. I was to be bonded with a human captain to seal the agreement between our species. If I return home without completing this mission, it will be seen as a failure. My clan will be dishonored and the peace between our peoples may be broken." Jake was beginning to understand how complicated the situation really was. Zara was not just a passenger who needed a ride home. She was a diplomat whose mission had been abandoned by Rodriguez. Now she was stuck with Jake, who knew nothing about diplomacy or alien politics. "What does it mean to be bonded?" Jake asked carefully. He was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. Zara looked down at her hands. "Among my people, bonding is a sacred partnership. Two beings join together to share their lives and work toward common goals. It is not the same as human marriage, but it is equally important. A bonded pair supports each other and represents both their peoples." Jake felt his stomach twist. He had bought a ship and accidentally acquired an alien wife. The situation was getting more impossible by the minute. What if I do not want to be bonded? What if you do not want to be bonded to me? Zara met his eyes and Jake saw sadness there. "My wants do not matter. I volunteered for this mission to serve my people. As for your wants, Callian law says that I belong to the ship's owner. Rodriguez bought me from my clan with trade goods and promises of alliance. When he sold the ship, he sold me as well?" Jake stood up quickly. "Nobody owns you. I do not believe in slavery, and I will not treat you as property. You are a person with your own thoughts and feelings. I want to help you, but only if you choose. To accept my help? Zara looked surprised by his words. You would give up ownership of me? Even though I am valuable and could help you in many ways? Yes, Jake said without hesitation. You are not a thing to be owned. You are a person who deserves respect and freedom. For the first time since waking up, Zara smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed her whole face. You are very different from what I expected, Jake Morrison. Perhaps there is hope for both of us after all. The next few days were awkward for both Jake and Zara. She was weak from the long stasis and needed time to recover her strength. Jake gave her the captain's quarters and moved his things to a smaller room. He wanted her to feel safe and comfortable. While she figured out what to do next, Zara was quiet most of the time. She would sit in the observation deck and stare out at the stars, looking lost and homesick. Jake brought her meals and tried to make conversation, but she seemed wrapped up in her own thoughts. He could tell she was worried about her future and missing her home. On the fourth day, Jake was working on the ship's engines when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Zara watching him work. She was wearing simple clothes he had found in the ship's stores, and her blue skin looked healthier than it had when she first woke up. May I help you? Zara asked softly. I am skilled with machinery, and I need something to do with my hands. Jake was surprised by the offer. Are you sure? This is dirty work, and some of these systems are pretty old. Zara smiled and rolled up her sleeves. I have been working with engines since I was a child. My people are good with technology, even if it is different from what we are used to. Jake handed her a diagnostic tool and showed her what he was testing. Within minutes, Zara had found the problem that he had missed. The power coupling was damaged in a way that would have caused serious trouble later. Her knowledge of energy systems was far beyond anything Jake had learned. How did you spot that so quickly? Jake asked as they worked together to fix the coupling. Zara's hands moved with practiced skill as she explained. Kellyan technology is based on energy manipulation. We learn to feel the flow of power through systems. Your human technology is cruder, but the basic principles are the same. The energy patterns tell me where problems are hiding. Working together, they finished the engine repairs in half the time it would have taken Jake alone. Zara's understanding of power systems helped her adapt quickly to human technology. Jake found himself learning new ways to think about the ship's systems from her different perspective. Over the next week, they worked on various parts of the ship. Zara's knowledge proved invaluable for upgrading the outdated systems. She showed Jake how to improve the engine efficiency and how to boost the navigation computer's processing power. The ship was becoming more capable than it had ever been. As they worked, Jake and Zara talked about their different worlds and cultures. Jake learned that Kellya was a planet with 3 moons and cities built into the sides of great cliffs. Zara's people valued harmony and cooperation above individual achievement. They had developed amazing technology but had little interest in conquest or expansion. Zara learned about Earth and human nature from Jake's stories. She was fascinated by humanity's drive to explore and build new things. She was also surprised by the diversity of human cultures and the way people could disagree and still work together. Your people are very different from mine, Zara said one evening as they shared dinner. Kellyans value consensus and tradition. We make decisions slowly and carefully. Humans seem to act quickly and take risks. Jake nodded. Sometimes that gets us into trouble, but it also helps us adapt to new situations, like this one. Zara looked thoughtful. Yes, this situation is certainly new. I was supposed to bond with Captain Rodriguez and help establish trade between our peoples. Instead, I find myself with a human who refuses to claim ownership of me and treats me as an equal partner. Is that bad? Jake asked. It is different, Zara replied, but perhaps different is what we need. The original plan was based on old traditions and formal agreements. What we have now is based on mutual respect and shared goals. Jake had been thinking about their situation too. What if we created our own plan? You know about diplomacy, and I know about trading. Maybe we could work together to build the alliance your people wanted, but do it our own way. Zara's eyes lit up with interest. What do you mean? Well, Jake said, warming to the idea, we could use this ship to travel between human and Kellyan settlements. We could carry messages, facilitate trade, and help both sides understand each other better. It would not be the formal bonding ceremony your people expected, but it might accomplish the same goals. Zara was quiet for a long moment. It would be dangerous. There are groups on both sides who do not want humans and Kellyans to become allies. Some of my people believe humans are too aggressive and unpredictable. Some humans fear that aliens will try to conquer or replace them. That is why we need to start small, Jake said. We could visit the frontier colonies where people are more open to new ideas. We could prove that cooperation benefits everyone. Zara stood up and walked to the window. Jake could see her thinking hard about his proposal. Finally, she turned back to him. There is something you should know about my original mission. I was not just sent to bond with a human captain. I was also carrying information that could benefit both our peoples. Jake felt a chill of worry. What kind of information? Technical knowledge, Zara said. My people have developed new ways to purify water, generate clean energy, and grow food in difficult conditions. We were prepared to share this knowledge as part of the alliance. But we also have information about threats in this part of the galaxy. Jake leaned forward. What kind of threats? Zara's expression grew serious. There are other species out there that are not as peaceful as humans and Kellyans. Some are expanding their territory and looking for new worlds to conquer. My people have been watching them from a distance, but we know that eventually they will reach this sector. And you think humans and Kellyans working together could defend against these threats? I think humans and Kellyans working together could defend against anything, Zara said firmly. Your people have courage and adaptability. Mine have advanced technology and strategic thinking. Together we could build something stronger than either of us could create alone. Jake felt a surge of excitement and fear. The mission Zara was proposing was much bigger than simple trade negotiations. They would be working to forge an alliance that could determine the future of both species. It was exactly the kind of challenge that appealed to his human nature. So we become partners, Jake said. Not because some law says you belong to me, but because we choose to work together towards something important. Zara smiled and extended her hand. Partners, she agreed. Bound by choice rather than obligation? Jake shook her hand, feeling the strange texture of her blue skin. It was the beginning of something entirely new. 3 months later, the Stellar Dawn looked like a completely different ship. Jake and Zara had worked together to upgrade every system on board. The engines now ran smoother and faster than they ever had before. The navigation computer could plot courses through space that human technology alone could never have calculated. The ship had become a perfect blend of human engineering and Kellyan innovation. Their first mission was to visit New Haven, a frontier colony that had been having problems with their water purification systems. The colonists were facing a crisis that could force them to abandon their settlement. Jake and Zara arrived with Kellyan technology that could solve the problem in days. Rather than months, the colonists were suspicious at first. They had never seen an alien before, and some of them were frightened by Zara's blue skin and glowing markings. But when her water purification system began producing clean drinking water from the colony's contaminated supply, their fear quickly turned to gratitude. Jake handled the negotiations while Zara supervised the technical installation. They made a good team. Jake's straightforward human approach put the colonists at ease, while Zara's knowledge made their problems disappear. Within a week, New Haven had enough clean water to support twice their current population. The colony leaders were so impressed that they sent messages to other settlements about Jake and Zara's partnership. Soon, requests for help were coming. From across the frontier, human colonies needed Kellyan technology, and Kellyan outposts needed human trade goods and mechanical expertise. Their second mission took them to a Kellyan research station that had been attacked by raiders. The station's defenders had fought off the attack, but their equipment was damaged and several people were injured. Jake's medical supplies and repair skills were exactly what they needed. Zara was nervous about visiting her own people. She had been away for months and was not sure how they would react to her partnership with a human, but the Kellyan researchers welcomed them both with open arms. They were amazed by the improvements Jake and Zara had made to their ship and eager to learn about human technology. The station commander, an elderly Kellyan named Elder Voss, spoke with Zara privately about her mission. He told her that the formal bonding ceremony with Rodriguez had been less important than the actual cooperation between their peoples. What she and Jake had built was exactly what the alliance was meant to achieve. "You have done something remarkable," Elder Voss told Zara. "You have shown that our peoples can work together as equals. This is more valuable than any traditional ceremony." Elder Voss also shared disturbing news about the raiders who had attacked the station. They belonged to a species called the Hegemony, an aggressive empire that was expanding into this region of space. The Hegemony had been testing the defenses of both human and Kellyan settlements, looking for weak points to exploit. "They will return in greater numbers," Elder Voss warned. "Neither humans nor Kellyans can stand against them alone. But together, we might have a chance." Jake and Zara left the research station with a new sense of urgency. The threat Elder Voss had described was real and growing. They needed to help their peoples prepare for what was coming over the next 6 months. Jake and Zara visited dozens of settlements across the frontier. They carried messages between human and Kellyan leaders, facilitated trade agreements, and helped both sides understand each other better. Wherever they went, they left behind stronger communities and closer cooperation. The Stellar Dawn became famous throughout the sector. People called it the bridge ship because it connected 2 different worlds. Jake and Zara were no longer just a human trader and an alien diplomat. They had become symbols of what their peoples could accomplish together. Their partnership had also grown into something deeper than either of them had expected. They had started as strangers thrown together by chance, but working side by side, had created a bond that went beyond friendship or business. They understood each other in ways that transcended the differences between their species. One evening, as they traveled between star systems, Zara found Jake on the observation deck looking out at the stars. She had been thinking about their future and the choices they would need to make. "Do you ever regret buying this ship?" she asked him. Jake smiled. "Every day I thank whatever luck brought me to that auction. I thought I was just buying a cheap freighter, but I got something much more valuable." "What did you get?" "A partner," Jake said simply. "Someone who makes me better than I could ever be alone." Zara moved closer to him. "I used to think that bonding was about duty and obligation. My people taught me that personal feelings were less important than serving the greater good. But what we have built together is based on choice and mutual respect. It is stronger than any traditional bond." Jake reached out and took her hand. "So what do we do next?" Zara squeezed his fingers. "We keep building bridges. The hegemony threat is growing stronger, but so is the alliance between our peoples. Every settlement we visit, every trade agreement we facilitate, every friendship we help create makes us all stronger. And us?" Jake asked. "What happens to us?" Zara's violet eyes met his. "We stay together. We keep exploring new worlds and meeting new people. We show everyone that differences can be a source of strength rather than division." Jake nodded. "The galaxy is a big place. There are probably other species out there who could benefit from what we have learned. Other species who might join the alliance," Zara added. "The hegemony is not the only threat we will face. But if we can bring together enough different peoples, we can defend against anything." 6 months later, the Stellar Dawn was part of a small fleet of ships carrying the first joint human-Kellyan diplomatic mission to the Centauri colonies. Jake and Zara had helped plan the mission and would serve as cultural advisors. It was the largest cooperation between their peoples in history as they approached the Centauri system. Jake stood on the bridge next to Zara and watched the other ships in their formation. Human vessels flew alongside Kellyan craft in perfect harmony. It was exactly what they had dreamed of when they first decided to work together. The cheap ship Jake had bought at auction had become the foundation for an alliance that would change the galaxy. And the alien bride he had found in the cargo hold had become his true partner in every sense of the word. Neither of them knew what challenges waited in the unknown regions of space, but they were ready to face them together. The bridge between worlds had been built, and it would carry them all toward a brighter future.